What happened in the Eric Faust trial? I need to bring you guys up to date. I haven't done a recording in a few days, and we are now on day 7. So I'm going to give you as much information as I can on what has happened between the last episode and today. And anything else you missed, I'll hit it tomorrow. There you go. Because this trial is not ending anytime soon. I'm talking about the trial of Eric Faust for the University of Georgia Athens murder of Tara Baker back in 2001. He was not arrested until 2024 and now is on trial with very little evidence that I have heard. And I'm kind of concerned about these cases getting to trial with such minimal evidence lately. It seems like there's been a bunch of them. But in any case, we're going to talk about it after this intro. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Before we get into anything else, please, if you wouldn't mind, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to hit that all button too if you want to get notifications for when I roll out a new video. So anyway, Eric Faust, he is on trial for the murder that happened back in January of 2021 of Tara Baker. She was living in a neighborhood called Deer Park, going to college at UGA, first year of law school, second semester. She wanted to be a real estate attorney. At one point in time, she wanted to be a Supreme Court justice. Then she changed her mind and said, I'll just be a real estate attorney. You'll get there, honey. You would have got there. Supreme Court, you would have got there. It's difficult, but you would have got there. Anyway, one fine morning, she's in this house. She's rented this house with these two other women, also in grad school. They're away in the morning. She's home alone about between 8 and 9 a.m. I'm guessing closer to 8:30-ish timeline wise. She's murdered. She's raped and murdered. And the perpetrator starts a fire in the bedroom. And a neighbor notices the smoke, calls the fire department. They come out and they find her body in the bedroom. And a fire analyst said this was a very slow-moving fire. So her body was charred, but that is not what killed her. She died of strangulation with an electrical cord. And her neck had been sliced. Mm-hmm. And what else? Blunt force trauma to the head. Yeah. As well as sexually assaulted. So, continuing with the evidence, they don't arrest her boyfriend, Chris Melton, who there's tons of evidence against. But they arrest Eric Faust 23 years later. For 23 years, this was a cold case. And we did hear from the cold case officer. And I'm going to tell you what he had to say. He was assigned to the case about 4 or 5 years after the murder. And I'll tell you what he did with the case. In any case, we're going to pick up on day 4 with one of the roommates. And there were 3 women. They all had boyfriends. She said none of them had keys to the house. None of the boys. But they all spent a lot of time together. She said Tara spent most of her time. Now, they had only been living together, these 3 women, for 1 semester. So now we're going into the second semester that they're living together. But that first semester, she said Tara spent most of her time at Chris Melton's house. Now, Chris Melton is the boyfriend. And I've got some interesting things that I've learned about him. So she said it was rare for Tara to be home, between August and December. But after that first semester, she decided she was going to spend more time at home, buckling down with her studies. And Interestingly enough, this woman said that in her room, she had jewelry and valuables and money just sitting out. Anybody could have come in and taken it, and they did not. Nothing was disturbed in her room. So robbery was not the motive here. So in any case, on cross-examination, it was brought out that in a prior interview, she had said, it's like someone knew she was going to be home alone. Now that's interesting. Now, who would have known that? Her boyfriend, Chris Melton. Not Edric Faust. I don't even know who Edric Faust is, except he's a black man sitting at the defense table. So then we get this little old lady on the stand. She was adorable, and she was the sketch artist. Now we've seen several sketches of people who saw a black man walking through the neighborhood that day or around that time, that morning. And all the sketches are different, and none of them look like the defendant. So where was I going with this? Oh, so she talked about her process, how she comes out with these sketches, and her training and everything, which was not much. I took every course they had at some school, and she couldn't remember the name of the school. But in any case, she brings the people in. She worked for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. She would bring them in and have them go through like booking photos and find anything that they thought had a feature that they might have seen on the person that they saw. The nose, the eyes, the shape of the eyes, the shape of the mouth, the ear, that kind of thing. And she says usually people pick out 10 or 15, and then they'll start the process of adding and subtracting and come up with a photo. And it doesn't take very long at all, less than an hour for these photos to be done. And there wasn't a lot that she had to offer in her testimony, except now we know who the sketch artist was. In any case, next person on the stand was a fingerprint analyzer, and she was there to talk about since the initial investigation in 2001, they have some newer chemicals in the fingerprint world. And so they went back and tested the butcher block that was found in the kitchen that the knife was taken from. They tested that again, and they retested the knife for fingerprints. Both were negative for fingerprints. Then we get a crime scene investigator who was sent out to Chris Melton's to get evidence. He took photographs, he collected hair samples, both regular hair and pubic hair from Chris Melton, photographed his hands. Now, there's a photograph of his hands out there, and if I can find it, I'll put it in here. And I just want to write the timestamp down so I can put the photograph in if I can find it. And I'm going to talk about, he took the stand yesterday, and I'm going to get to that, but he talks about why his hands look like that, and we're going to get there. And this was 2 days after the murder that he went out and photographed this guy's hands and collected all these samples. Then there was some talk about Tara Baker's cell phone records with this witness, and the judge decided that there was no foundation for the defense attorney to talk about cell phone records with this guy. Like, there was no, they have to lay a foundation when you bring in records like that they're kept in the ordinary course of business, and that these are, true and accurate and blah, blah, blah. Nobody had done that with these cell phone records. So the judge was like, you can't talk about these cell phone records. Guys, I was really interested to hear about Tara Baker's cell phone records. Nope, can't talk about it. So this defense attorney, at some point, if he wants those cell phone records in, he's going to have to figure out a way to get them authenticated. He's going to have to figure out how they were obtained, what company sent them, and then see if he can get them into the evidence. So we don't know anything about the cell phone records yet. Then we have the next witness, Shannon Brown. She was, God, I don't remember who she was, but they tried to show her a photograph of Edric Faust and have it compared to the person she saw. I don't know. But there was so much going on with this photograph. It was a booking photo, and they had to redact it because the plaintiff attorney is like, I'm just gonna, I won't say it's a booking photo, and the judge is like, well, it's obvious it's a booking photo. But apparently, the bottom line is February 8th, which is days after this murder, Edric Faust is arrested for something. I don't know what, and he's got a booking photo out there. And they don't want the jury to know that this guy's got a booking photo. So they tried to remove the background on the photo. And I don't know. When we came back from all this back and forth discussion between all the lawyers and the judge, I don't know what happened to the witness. I don't know. I really don't. Anyway, the next person on the stand was a Georgia Bureau of Investigation forensic scientist. And she solved the hair mystery. I don't know if you recall, but one of the theatrics that's occurred during this trial is the defense attorney having one of the investigators pour the hair out of the envelope that it was collected and stored into. And there was nothing in there. In 3 different cases, there was no hair where there was supposed to be hair. So everybody was like, oh, what happened to the hair? Well, here's what happened to the hair. This scientist took the hair and prepared slides. And she said, once the slide is prepared with the hair on it, they don't return it back to the original envelope. They put it in, she says, before they just kind of stored them and things would get broken. And so a couple of years ago, back in 2024, they were remounted, the slides, not remounted, but they were taken and put into new containers, like these little plastic containers, so they wouldn't break. So that's where the hair is. It was stored on these slides. So they bring the slides out, and there's lots of discussion about the slides, and does this hair look like this hair? And it all looks like hair to me. But supposedly it was Caucasian hair, not black hair. Anyway, so let's talk about Chris Melton, this boyfriend. Now, he went to Georgia College, and he said he was interested in, he missed the camaraderie of high school and, getting together with everybody at the school, and he wanted to do something. So he goes to the sports department, and he ends up becoming a cheerleader, and he loved it. And he met Tara through her roommate. Her roommate was dating his roommate or one of the other cheerleaders, and they got introduced, and this is how he met Tara. And funny enough, he graduated, and he didn't really have any idea what he wanted to do. So when he gets home after graduation, his mom is waiting for him at the table, and she's like, look, there's a plumbing job. Go for it. He does. Gets the plumbing job, becomes a plumber, loves it, eventually starts his own business. So he said they had a very strong relationship, him and Tara, and that they were working towards having a future together. He knew that, he wasn't going to get to see her as much because she wanted to buckle down to go to law school, get through law school. And he was trying to get this plumbing thing going, and they were just working towards building a future, is what he said. What that tells me is that his testimony was very well rehearsed. And that was brought out on cross. The number of times this man has met with the prosecution team before his testimony. because he was really high up on the suspect list. Anytime you have a murder, you're looking at the boyfriend, the husband, the person they're having an affair with, whatever. But those are people usually very high up on the chain of suspects, as was he. So he said that on the morning of the 19th, the morning of the murder, January 19th, he had a contract for working with Nash Plumbing. Now, by now, he's working on his own. He's going out to these different larger contractors and getting jobs. So he went to this place called Nash Plumbing, and they gave him a task to do that day. And what he would do is he and his employee, which was his friend Josh, longtime friend, they went to school together, they would go to the site and do whatever the task was for that day. And then they would get reimbursed by this plumbing company. Anyway, he learned that afternoon from Tara's mom. Tara's mom called him, and he learned about that there had been a fire at the home, and that a body had been discovered, but didn't know whose body it was. So he said he kind of collapsed down to his knees. It just shook him. And he immediately went to the home. And actually, he called the police department. And they said, come on out, come to the police department. So he goes to the police department. They ask him a few questions. And then they said, listen, can you these other women, can you identify this body for us and let us know which of these women it is? And he figured that he would save the parents of these other women in case it was one of them. He would save them from having to do this task. So he said, okay, I'll do it. So they take him to the home, his body's still there, and he figures out it's Tara. But he doesn't get to see the body. Firefighters won't let him in the house. Can't come in. So they photograph the body and then bring the photos out to him and say, is this her? And he's like, yeah, that's her. That's so weird. Anyway. And one of the features that led them to the identification was he had given her some diamond earrings for their 2-year anniversary, which was back on July 4th, about 6 months before that. And the victim was wearing those earrings. And she wore those earrings, he said, all the time. So after this identification, he goes back to the police department and he is interviewed. Now, he was asked about his hands, and he says, I realize there's photos of my hands out there. My hands are stained from primer, the chemicals they use in plumbing. It stains your hands. This is what he says. And he said that once he got home, he was so upset and so emotional about losing Tara that he was punching the walls. He said he punched a whole slew of sheetrock out of the wall. Luckily didn't hit any studs, just the sheetrock. So during this entire time, though, he's cooperating with police. He's volunteering information. He's volunteering to do something. They didn't have to make him do anything. He volunteered to give the samples, the DNA, the hair, the photos. And then he did start crying during his testimony. I'm going to show you a little clip of his testimony.
And we were put up in a hotel room, my parents, my mother, my father, myself.
Well, and let me ask you this and back up a little bit. When you interviewed with the police on January 19th, did you have any kind of things on your hands from working?
Yes, sir, which I usually did, like primer, if you're in glue, solvents, they can stain your hands. Primer is purple in color. Some may even say kind of purplish blue, and whatever it touches, it stains. Piping cement, it kind of adheres to you pretty well. And I had things such as, I believe, that on my hands. Yes, sir.
Okay. So I want to go forward now to January 20th of 2001. This is the day after. At that point, did you ever return to those Jamestown apartments that you had an apartment at?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
My parents had taken me back to the apartment to grab a few things.
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Melton. How do you typically deal with very stressful situations with difficult emotions involved?
Traditionally, I bottle it up inside, and I bottle it up inside and try to hold a secure presence for myself and the people around me. And yes, sir.
What happened on that day, on January 20th, the day after Tara's murder, once you got inside of your apartment, townhome, however you want to describe it?
Once we entered my apartment, my parents were with me, and I started having an extreme emotional moment. And they recognized that it was hard for me to hold it in any longer. And I do recall my parents coming to me and wrapping their arms around me and trying to get me to calm down. And in that moment, I actually felt claustrophobic. I felt restraint. And I remember pulling away from my father to get away from him. And then I spun around, and there was a wall in front of me at the bottom of the stairwell, and it was the sheetrock wall. And I just remember unleashing my emotions on the sheetrock wall, and I punched it. I don't know, maybe 30 times, maybe more.
Did that do any damage to that wall?
Oh, yes, sir.
Did it do any damage to your hands?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good. What kind of damage did it do to your hands?
It scratched my hands up. It swole my hands up. Fortunately, I didn't break anything, and I guess fortunately, I didn't find a stud in the wall. It was mainly sheetrock, and as I went through the sheetrock, I was finding, I believe it was the concrete siding on the outside. It was an exterior wall, so I was punching through the sheetrock and hitting the concrete siding to the outside, and I was knocking, to my knowledge, I was knocking the siding loose also.
Okay.
He gets really very, very emotional, and he says, Jesus helped him get through it. Yep. So cross-examination, he couldn't recall if she had told him she was going to be alone that morning. Couldn't recall that. And then he kind of goes through a timeline, but not really. He said at 7:45, he was at this Nash Plumbing, and then afterwards went to the bank. And that's kind of all we got as far as the timeline. There's more information on the timeline coming up here. So I'm going to talk about the sexual part at this point if you need to have the kids leave the room here. So how do I say this? Semen had been found in the Tara Baker's anus. He claims they never had anal sex. Never. In fact, they hadn't had sex for at least anywhere from 6 to 10 days before the murder. They hadn't had sex. But the defense attorney says, well, how do you explain your semen? Because apparently it came back to him. How do you explain that being there if you hadn't had anal sex with her? And he goes, well, it must have drained down from the, I can't believe I'm talking about this, drained from the vagina down to the anus. Like, this testimony was so awkward. So awkward. Yeah. Anyway. I know, I'm flabbergasted. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about David Griffith, the criminal analyst. Now, he came onto the scene in late 2005. He worked for, I don't even write down who he worked for, but GBI, I think, yeah, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, yeah, criminal analyst. He is trained as a cold case homicide detective. And at the time, this was sort of a newer thing. Not people didn't get trained in how to do this, and it was just kind of evolving. And then he got into it, and he loved it, and now he teaches it. And so he gets this case in 2005, and he said it was multiple volumes of 3-ring binders, multiple. And his job is to like go through it all the interviews, all the video, everything. And what he did was he created a timeline of events using some case map software. We didn't see this time. They showed his report. It was about this thick, about 2 inches thick, his report. Not coming in because police reports don't come into evidence. But he couldn't, it's been 25 years, or 20 years. He doesn't remember what he put in that report 20 years ago. But he says, if I put it in that report, it's all hearsay. I got all of that from the file. It wasn't direct knowledge. It's from all of the evidence that's in the file. And what he did was he put all this stuff together to do a presentation at Quantico in front of the FBI. It's called a peer review, and they present their case, and then the FBI makes suggestions. So they presented the case, and at the time, Chris Melton, he said, was a person of interest. And he says, he was asked about this. He says, he's not absolved. He is not absolved, but it is highly unlikely that he is the one that committed the murder. Because based on all of the evidence he reviewed, which is interviews with Chris Melton's parents, with Chris, with Josh, the friend who was, working with him in the plumbing business, and the bank tellers, because remember he said he went to the bank. Based on all of that, he concluded, he says that a lot of their times did not match up. This is all happening between 7:45 and, that morning, trying to figure out where Chris Melton is. And their times don't really match up, but they all have him very far west of Athens. So he says there's no way Chris Melton was in Athens at the time of the murder. Even though he never obtained confirmation of Chris Melton being at Nash Plumbing that morning, because Chris Melton said he was at Nash Plumbing from 7:45 till about 9 o'clock. No one ever received confirmation of that. Apparently the coworker was not initially interviewed, but then interviewed later on. And his testimony was that after they left Nash Plumbing, he went to Grayson And he says it was around 8 a.m. that they went to Grayson. I guess that's another town in Georgia. But Chris Melton said they went to Grayson's afterwards too, but he puts the timing at later, closer to 9. So there, and we know the murder was around 8 o'clock in the morning. So that's his testimony. He was at the bank footage, video surveillance footage shows Chris Melton at the bank at 9:08 a.m. But all of these places are west of Athens, and he would not have had time to get back to Athens, commit the murder, and get back to all these other things that he was doing that day. So basically, they're not looking at Chris Melton anymore. There's a couple of other places that they said they went in the timeline, a place called Truck Custom and Chick-fil-A, all west of Athens. So that was this guy's testimony. Then they ended day 4 with a hearing on God knows what, because I just lost track. I mean, I've already listened to 8 hours of testimony. Now they're having another hearing on something, a Daubert hearing. A Daubert hearing is where they're challenging the science of what prosecution wants to bring in, saying like it's junk science. Is it junk science or is it real science? And I think that has to do with this true allele DNA stuff. So we're going to hear more about that in tomorrow's episode, because I've gone on far too long this morning. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and hype the video. Why not? You get points. I don't know what the points are for, but you get them. Maybe you could tell me what the points are for. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Take care, everybody.